recording. And with that, I guess it's 4:02. Let's start the show. But I guess that's a nice segue into talking about the connection between New York and Palm Beach. If there wasn't a connection between, or a perceived connection between Palm Beach and New York, we wouldn't, we could be talking about Fort Lauderdale or Miami Beach or Palm Springs. But there seems to be a particular connection between New York City, high end, and Palm Beach. And that's, I think, why we wanted to talk to you today, Whitney, because you're the expert on Palm Beach, and you can tell us maybe why that is.
Sure. So, Palm Beach has always been a winter retreat for New Yorkers in the New England corridor. Growing up here as a kid, it was always season was, November through April, but really everyone came down for about 3 to 4 months between, say, January and April. But the more time that passes, the longer our shoulder seasons are lasting. So we're starting to see people coming down here in October and staying through May, maybe even June. So we're also seeing more and more year-rounders come as well. So it's we're a tiny little island just off the coast of Florida. I mean, you just go over the 3 bridges, the middle, north, or south bridge. We're about, almost 7.5 square miles is what our area is. And we have about 8,500 full-time residents with, and season ballooning to about 25,000. But of those numbers, more and more are starting to become year-round residents. And I think we've seen that in the last, say, 5 to 10 years. So it's becoming more family friendly as well. Lots of people are moving their businesses down here, and we're starting to see people not only just come down here for fun, but they're also coming down here to work and kind of raise their families, which is something new.
All right, so let me back up a minute. This is Whitney McGurk in Palm Beach. You're in the office of Brown Harris Stevens down there, and you have a partner, Pulitzer. Is that her name?
Yeah, Liza Pulitzer.
Liza Pulitzer. And how long have you been working in the Palm Beach market?
About 6 years now.
But you were born there, and you're a native Palm Beacher.
I'm a native Palm Beacher. I did spend about 10 years in Manhattan, though.
Okay.
Whitney, is Eliza related to Lily?
Yes, she's her daughter.
That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So she's also native Palm Beach.
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's not too many of us, quite frankly, that were born and raised here. But yeah, every once in a while you meet a couple.
Okay, and so when you talk about a lot of people moving down there and becoming year-rounders, let's just put this in perspective. I read online that there's 8,000 people, according to the last census, who live in Palm Beach, and it swells up to 25,000 in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even as big as Nantucket, right? I mean, this is small. We're talking small.
Sure.
So when you guys fill up, New York doesn't even feel it.
No, not at all.
Except for the fact that you get 30 billionaires. Of those 8,000 people, 30 of them are billionaires.
Yes.
Okay. So
I'm sure there's more out there that we don't know of, but yes.
And so is this really just a billionaire playground, or is there anything normal whatsoever about this market that we're talking about?
So there's a couple of different aspects of the market. So no, I mean, you can still get a great home in the area if you're not a billionaire. I would obviously say most people are not. But, we have the Palm Beach market and our West Palm Beach market. As my parents always said, the Palm Beach market was Camelot and the West Palm Beach market is the real world. So, our average price home in Palm Beach is about 8 million. And I would say in West Palm Beach, it's far lower in the, hundreds of thousands. It's okay. But everything is starting to migrate west over the bridge into West Palm Beach. So people that used to be able to afford Palm Beach, are getting a little priced out now, unless they are the billionaires or the 100 millionaires. And they're moving to West Palm Beach, which is, that market is thriving as well.
Is that because of an inventory problem essentially on Palm Beach?
I think it's an inventory problem, but it's also just a price point. Homes in West Palm Beach, I think the most expensive one last year ever hit a record on the water, sold for about 13 million. And Palm Beach, our record price is about 110 million, give or take. So it's just a completely different market, but a beautiful home in West Palm Beach, you could get for a couple $1 million, whereas that same home in Palm Beach is going to be double or maybe even triple the price.
So can we just talk about just like there's, if I say someone wants to ask about Manhattan, I can say there's the Upper West Side, there's this and that. So the Palm Beach itself, the islands, a very narrow strip, like is the northern part considered more, chic than the southern part, or, what are how is it different on that strip?
Sure. So the main island itself is comprised of a couple different areas. So I'll start from the south and kind of work our way north. There's the south end, which are predominantly condos. And those historically have always just been an older demographic. The snowbirds, they come down here, condos could range from a couple 100,000 up into, I think we did one of the records down there at about 7 million for a penthouse. That's kind of the southern end. It's all condos. They're all built probably in the 70s or 80s. As you kind of work your way north, we get into the estate section, which it's all predominantly larger estate-like properties. So they're all kind of Mediterranean on larger lots. A lot are on the water, whether the intercoastal or the ocean. This is like an older demographic. There's no sidewalks, there's no bike trail access, there's little beach access, but nobody really in the estate section uses the beach. It's just a more formal setting. Then we start to get into town, which becomes, more congested. And those, you have access to the bike path, you have access to the beach. There's sidewalks, it's family friendly, but they're mostly smaller lots depending on the street. And then as you work your way north, it becomes more casual, more beach oriented, more relaxed. You'll see golf carts riding around, kids all over the place, but that's where really the families are starting to flock to. It was always considered a more affordable area of the island. Now it's become the hottest market. So the north end is where everyone wants to be. It ranges from kind of ranch style houses that start at about 4 to 5 million and go up to 20 million-ish, dry, not on the water. But everyone wants to kind of be there. It's just a more relaxed lifestyle. The surfing up there is great. The beaches are the best up there. So that's kind of where everyone seems to want to be. And it was funny, last year I was talking to my partner, last year, the year before, Scott, isn't it crazy that we did an interview somewhere and he said, if you could find a house in the north end for $3 million, buy it, don't think twice, enjoy it. Now that same house is around $5 million. So in 2 years, it's the dirt alone is 3 million to 3.5.
How long is that stretch? So how long is the island? Miles?
Miles, I believe it's 8 miles. I would say that stretch is maybe, in particular, it's probably about 15 blocks is really the hot area, but you could extend it on both sides. So maybe a mile or two.
Small.
Yeah.
So here's a $5 million, one of your listings, $5 million. Is this north or south?
This is north. Okay. This house actually we sold last November for 4.2.
Okay.
The owner has decided to, actually this owner has 9 children for a 3-bedroom house, but they live in Pennsylvania and they wanted a little retreat for themselves. When COVID hit, I started thinking about coming down here more, and what they've decided to do is, get something bigger so that the whole family could start to enjoy the Palm Beach because of COVID and getting out of the north. So in a year and a half, they've or not even a year and a half, a year, and we're showing it all day, every day. So it's just a matter of time.
Explain the overhead picture I see. I see the ocean in the to the right. So I guess I'm looking north, and this is in the north half of Palm Beach.
Yes, it is. So this is right before the like really, really hot neighborhoods. Basically on the other side of that golf course is that stretch that I was talking about. That's probably about a mile and a half. But this is great because this one has access to the beach and the bike path as well. And, you know, it's just simplicity of living is how I would put this one.
So explain to me, it says annual real estate tax, $44,000. In New Canaan, I could see a $44,000 tax bill. And I say, well, you know, we invest 80% of that goes into the schools. And so that's why people move to New Canaan. Where does that money go in Palm Beach, and what's it based on? Is it based on the current market value of the house?
It is based on the current market value of the house. So typically what happens is that we taxes are reassessed on a purchase price. So we have a thing called homesteading here, where this is your permanent residence, 6 months in a day, you can homestead your home. And the biggest benefit to that is the county cannot raise your property taxes more than 3% year over year. If your house is not homesteaded, they can raise it up to about 8%. So, you know, there's a real advantage to homesteading your property a year.
Can you explain what that means?
So homesteading basically means that you're making Florida and that particular resident your permanent main residence. So you're living there for 6 months or a day, and so when this one is going to be closing, this Gulfview Road listed at 10-9 is going to be closing in a couple weeks. That will be reassessed at its purchase price. So the rule of thumb is that your taxes are going to be moving forward 2% of the purchase price. It's actually a little bit lower than that. And there's ways that we can mitigate that too more, but it's about 2% of the purchase price. And it goes to
So it's going to double.
Yeah.
It's going to go to around $200,000. There's no 8% or 2% cap.
No, so it'll start at, we pay ours in arrears. So next November, they'll get a tax bill for about $200,000. And then if it's homesteaded, it can only be raised that $200,000 can only be raised 3% each year. If it's not homesteaded, every year it'll get reassessed and could, increase up to 8%. However, this year, the first time in probably a long time, the county is actually thinking about discounting or bringing down the property taxes, because there's been such an influx in sales this year that there might be a surplus in tax revenue.
Wow.
Which sounds crazy, but.
Where is this particular $10 million property on that map? I see Gulfview Road, but is that a golf course below it?
Yeah, so that's the Everglades Golf Course. And essentially this house is smack dab in the middle of town and just on the edge of the estate section. So that house is 1 block north of Worth Avenue, and it's on a private street. It's just a really fantastic location if you want to be right in the middle of town.
Okay.
How many people did you say?
Now I have the map. You could talk. Now we can all follow along.
Exactly. How many people did you say were there as a primary resident, more or less?
At this point, we're probably about 8,500. I mean, next year it could be a lot more, but I would say roughly 8,500. And then in a season, it balloons to about 25,000.
Tell me some of, before, I know nothing about Palm Beach. And I mean, if you had said Palm Springs, I would have been like, sure, that's the one in Florida. But I mean, I wouldn't, What are the myths about Palm Beach that people say, and you're like, that's not true, but it's like, it's like people say things about the Hamptons and, it's like, it's all parties and this, that, and they go out there and they go, wow, this is pretty boring. It's like, what are the things that people should know as an insider or someone who's a regular that others don't know?
I would say all the myths are true and then some. No, everyone thinks that Palm Beach is a very formal way of living. And yeah, in the 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s, it definitely was a very formal way of living. And now it's totally different. I mean, you can have your formal living, maybe not this year, there's not the black tie balls and, charity events and what have you, but it's very beach and kind of resort like as well. So really you can kind of pick and choose how you want to live, where I think most people just think, oh, it's so fancy, I don't even want to go there. But it really has versatility in whether or not, you're going to go walk on the beach in the morning, to go play tennis at the Bath and Tennis Club, to, going and having just a barbecue somewhere, or you want to go to, a really fancy dinner, you can do that too. So it really is probably more versatile than people probably imagine.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
Is it too early to ask about Palm Beach's most famous current resident and how the island has changed perhaps in the last 4 years with his presence?
No, we can talk about that whenever. You just passed it on the map, but
Right, I see the Mar-a-Lago right there on the bridge. There's 3 bridges that connect you.
yes.
Okay.
That's the Southern Boulevard Bridge. I would say that the biggest, and I would leave the map right there, the biggest inconvenience or the biggest change that's happened with Trump being president is the bridge, the Southern Boulevard Bridge to the Bath and Tennis up into where it says A1A, that's basically closed. So when he's here, so that takes away one of the 3 arteries to get in and out of Palm Beach. So the biggest thing that happens when he's around is don't try to get off the island at 5 p.m. Avoid the Southern Bridge area at all costs. And, if you're a member of the B&T, it's a real pain because you got to go off island to go back on island to get to it. But that's probably the biggest change that I've seen or heard about. I mean, granted, we have a lot of residents that are in ambassadorships and different things. But those are probably the biggest changes.
Do you think that it was because of the president's and Air Force One and all the attention paid to Mar-a-Lago over the last 4 years that caused some of the newfound interest in Palm Beach and caused the prices to go up?
I think we were always, people always knew somewhat about Palm Beach. Definitely in the Northeast corridor, New England, and parts of Europe. I would say that Trump definitely put Palm Beach on the map as a recognized name, worldwide. Whereas before it was probably in just certain niches and demographics. How much it's driven our pricing, I don't think much. I don't think anyone's really moving here. Maybe they're moving away from here because he was here, but I don't think too many people are moving here because Trump is, or at least not that I've heard of.
I think the far bigger factor, and then I'll let Roberto dive in, but I have to get this question out. I know at least 5 hedge fund managers in my little town who left and had nothing to do with Trump. It had everything to do with the tax changes. And so Greenwich hedge fund managers, New Canaan hedge fund managers went down there for 6 months out of the year because it's easy to get to. Their clients are down there. But it was a tax strategy. And so I have to say that was probably the biggest factor for the Palm Beach appreciation in the last 4 years. Do you agree?
I do, yes. I think taxes have definitely driven a lot of the increased interest in the market. I just think, there's so much money out there being made by these hedge fund managers and just CEOs and the like, that if you can save 10, 13, 14% on taxes, it's a big chunk of change that you could park into some real estate and watch appreciate. So I think taxes have definitely been a catalyst in people moving here. I think also even pre-COVID, people were starting to realize, maybe I don't need to work and live on Wall Street or, in the city to make big money. People are starting to kind of maybe prioritize their lifestyle a little bit more because of the, ease of the internet and where you can be to, do business. So I think all of those things were driving our market pre-COVID, and actually February of 2020, we were having a record-breaking year and record-breaking sales, and it's like someone literally just pushed the pause button. And thankfully the play button was pushed not too long afterwards, and it's just been off to the races ever since.
Yeah, we were in New York. It's been 5 years of a slide, and this particular year, it was just beginning to turn, and we were so optimistic, and things were really moving, and then all of a sudden, COVID hit, and it just really disrupted the entire market. I have a question for you with regards to just like the mechanics of the deal and the cost. Like here in New York, you have transfer taxes, you have city and state transfer taxes, you have a mansion tax. What sort of taxes are there on a purchase there? And I'm sure it's probably a graduated scale, et cetera, but what sort of things is someone looking at?
From a tax perspective?
From just like costs. I mean, is there a cost to, for example, the island itself to buy there? Like if you buy in the Hamptons, there's a Peconic tax that you pay. Here there's different transfer taxes. I mean, is there something there that's specific to Palm Beach?
There's not specific to Palm Beach. I would say that we joke around that there's the bridge tax. So any vendor that comes across the bridge to do work in Palm Beach, you're going to be getting a little bit larger of a bill than you would in West Palm Beach.
Sure.
But nothing from a government perspective. Actually, the millage rate in Palm Beach itself is slightly lower than in West Palm Beach.
Oh, wow.
But we're also having sales of, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million. So I believe they can afford to have a slightly millage rate.
Yeah, for sure. So your market just this fall, how would you characterize your market? How different as far as deal flow from a year ago at this time?
It is, it's hard to put a number or quantify it. I would say that the market is just gone completely gangbusters. I mean, typically we have at any given point of the year, we have roughly about 185, 186, 187 single family homes on the market within, the three areas I talked about, the estate section, town, and North End. Right now we have just under 70 homes on the market. So we're at about 40% of our inventory from a normal perspective. So it's our biggest problem is finding inventory, finding something. I mean, there are more and more people coming. People ask me, "Would you think the rush has stopped?" No, I think we're, maybe in the third or fourth inning of the game. I think it's we got a ways to go before I think we see a pullback. We're just for instance, like our condo market was kind of dead this summer and the beginning of the fall, and now it's picked up again because people are here to stay. People would typically come for Thanksgiving and take off, but we're just going to constantly see transactions come through. It's just finding the inventory. Because there's plenty of buyers out there.
And I'm sure there's infinite stories, but generally, why are the people that are selling, where are they going? Just cashing in?
Across the causeway.
Some people are cashing in. Some people are upgrading. Some people actually are going from condos to homes. So, people are just kind of moving around. Some people are going, to downsizing to smaller homes within the island. So it's just, if we can find somebody that's even remotely willing to sell, the more difficult part is, well, where are you going to go?
Yeah.
If they don't have a desire to stay in Palm Beach, obviously it makes it easier, but we're also trying to figure out, those Europeans that aren't maybe going to come here this season. So are they willing to sell? because the inventory is driving the market right now, I think.
So properties that need gut renovations and things like that, you're not having any, like here, right now the market is down. So anything that needs work is a challenge to sell. But also there's so many building restrictions on doing work. And when we had COVID and we got shut down for several months, someone who was in the middle of a huge renovation just stopped. Is there any sort of discount on things like that that's quantifiable at all?
It's not really quantifiable, I don't think, but I would say, construction workers were considered essential business, so contractors never stopped, not at all.
Wow.
So they were always, working on their projects. It's not that there's a discount for houses that need renovations, but it's more that houses that are move-in ready, those are selling quicker because someone wants it now. Yeah. The other interesting thing that we're starting to see is that the value of our land is becoming so expensive that it's really the dirt that is driving some of the prices in certain, areas, because with things that need renovations, because you are looking at a similar cost to renovate than you are to build new. And the newer properties are attaining higher numbers. So people are saying, well, knock it down and start new. So, people are, willing to do it as long as they have the time and the fortitude to move forward with the project.
Do we want to take a question from any of our visitors? Do you have anything, Scott? Susan Wexler, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask about, is there an opportunity to build, or is land maxed out?
No, there's always opportunities to build. I mean, we obviously have a finite amount of land because we are an island, but there's always land that's available. I would say actually land sits on the market a little bit longer because most people that are willing to purchase land and go through the rigmarole of actually building, they're developers and they're going to want a better number or a better purchase price. So those tend to sit on the market a little bit longer than something that is done, for sure. But you can always, I should say always, but you can pretty much always find some sort of piece of land of any size.
Go ahead, Susan Wexler.
Yeah, could you speak more to the condo market? Since they're older units, are they generally run down? How are they appreciating? Is there a lot of renovation being done?
Sure. So our condo market has, it's been a little stagnant recently just because post-COVID, people really didn't want to be indoors, especially if they were coming, leaving their apartment in New York or where have you. They wanted to be outdoors, have their own pool, have their own space, have their own garden. A lot of the condos don't really provide that. So those condo market kind of went really quiet. I mean, almost non-existent. So to the point where we were taking condos off of the market until we knew that there was a market for people interested in condos. But it depends on the building. It depends on how it's run. Some buildings obviously are run better than others, but most of them have, they were built in the 70s or 80s. So they are, or maybe even the 60s. So they're, lower ceilings. They don't have the amenities that, like a New York building or even a Miami Beach building is producing these days. And our density laws don't really, it doesn't make sense to tear down buildings and start fresh with the new modern, up-to-date, open style living, open floor plan living. So people renovate how they can. And we're starting to see that condo market come back now that people are really here for the season. So, the other problem is we have a moratorium. Most buildings have a moratorium on when you can do renovations. So you can't even lift more than a hammer between between November 1st and April 31st. You can't lift more than a hammer. So your renovation time frame is really stuck within just 4 to 5 months.
And which months were they again that you can do it?
Excuse me?
Which months can you work?
You can work only in the summer months. So from May 1 to October 31st, typically.
Wow.
And the idea is everyone just tries to get their renovations and their plans close right at the end of April and hit the ground running so that they can, you know, do a quick renovation in, you know, 4 to 5 months.
So if you're trying to do a little bit of work on your house or something that happened in the middle of the summer, good luck.
The house you can do whenever you want, but it's the condo market in particular is, you know, you don't want to come down here for your season and hear construction next door to you, trying to relax and enjoy being down here. So that's why they put a lot of the buildings put restrictions on the condo market.
Scott asked about the schools. Scott?
Yeah, so how, I mean, Florida hasn't been known over time for its elementary schools and all, but as the tax revenues have grown and the governance has gotten better and that sort of stuff. So how are the public and access to private schools down there?
Sure. So the private schools are completely maxed out for the most part. The local day school here, I want to say they had 70, 80, 90 new families just in the last, since March. So they are at their absolute capacity, probably, you know, more so. You know, we are starting to see better education down in Florida. When I was growing up here, not so much. That's why I went up north for schooling. But you know, there's about 3 or 4 private schools, and then the one local public school in Palm Beach. I think that's maybe, if anyone were to hesitate on moving down here, moving forward, I would say it would be primarily because where am I going to put my kids in school? Because there's no room anymore.
How about other infrastructure questions? I mean, like the Hamptons is great just off season in the shoulder seasons. During the summer, it's beautiful, but you got a lot of people. So how's Palm Beach changing? Is it as the population grows and stays longer?
Roads are jammed. It's funny, you know, when you're in season in January, February, March, because it just takes a long time to get around. It's nothing like, 27 out in the Hamptons, but, you know, there's definitely areas that are, you know, pretty congested. What I will say that's new this year is we're starting to feel that congestion now. And we're starting to see a lot more New York plates down here, and very quick to honk on the horn. But infrastructure is fine. I mean, you know, they're in the process of undergrounding all of our power lines, and so that's kind of been, you know, a little bit of an issue. But they're repaving roads now because we've just got a lot of wear and tear this summer, and I think they're projecting for a lot more of it. So I think the tax revenue is there. They just need the crews to facilitate the infrastructure and you know, keeping up with the times.
So we have Rorik on the call. Rorik looks like he's got palm trees in the background. He is a great designer who works in the New York market and the Palm Beach market. So I think you had a question, and then I want to find out from you, Rorik, do you see a difference in basically what they ask of you in New York versus what they ask of you in Palm Beach? But go ahead, you first. You have to unmute.
So I've worked a lot down in Palm Beach. I'm based in New York, but do a lot of work in Palm Beach. And we've had clients who've straight up walked away from projects because of the Architectural Review Board. Which is notoriously difficult. And I'm wondering, do you think a lot of these new arrivals who, with lots of money, are used to getting their way, are going to be in for a bit of a rude awakening? And do you have any advice for how to navigate the Architectural Review Board so that you can, you know, get the home you want, but not have it delayed and possibly shut down?
Sure. Yes. I mean, we call RCOM, and it is, so there's actually, let me back up a little bit. There's actually two different boards that you need to go in front of in order to either build or do work. One is RCOM, and that's typically a new build, a renovation of a non-landmark property. Then we also have landmarks. So landmarks is a little easier to get through the process because willing to be a little more lenient on things that you want to do because you are keeping the integrity and the character of the town and taking on probably a little bit of a headache project if you know you're renovating a 1920s home. RCOM, on the other hand, is very difficult. They will ask you to come back multiple times, multiple revisions, and it can get very frustrating. There was a gentleman up on the north end who wanted to build a modern home on his a beautiful piece of property right direct to oceanfront. He actually sued these Florida state courts, and he lost. So he ended up selling his home actually just recently in the low 30 million range. So it does deter people. I would say that the biggest piece of advice I could get for someone that's from out of town that wants to go in front of RCOM, if you have an architect that is from out of state or even out of town, definitely team up with a local architect that knows how to navigate the rules and regulations of RCOM so that you're not wasting time going to the board with something that you know you're just never going to get past anyways. The other thing is I would say have a local attorney help you navigate the application and the process itself, along with you know whoever your team is, wherever it may be. But having local feet on the ground that know the ways to kind of work through the system, that's going to be its weight in gold.
Great. So to John, to your question of what clients like in Palm Beach, I mean, even the older set, they do like some of the relaxed, you know, even though it's formal and they still have their clubs and their dinners, it is a much more relaxed and a much more user-friendly feel, I think, when designing for clients down in Palm Beach, but they need to have the creature comforts that they're used to. I think the hardest thing to get used to for a New Yorker is, you know, there's the takeout options are limited, things shut down early. It's just some of them take a couple of years to get used to the pace to actually unwind when they get down here. But I think once they do, they start spending a lot more time down here and less up there. Sure.
And you know, we're actually to your point, you know, takeout was always, I mean, no one did takeout. Now everybody's doing takeout. So even during COVID, when there was, you know, quarantining, you'd go get your takeout, and if it wasn't ready, they would have a takeout bar menu. So you'd sit in your car with a cocktail or something waiting for your takeout food. So they figured out ways to, you know, make the takeout business work, and it's done really well. And I think New Yorkers are definitely probably used to that, like you said. So we're adapting to our market and the new people that are coming down here, I think.
During a typical busy season without COVID involved, is it like impossible to get a restaurant reservation? Do you have to call, like, you know, do you need to know somebody? Is that?
No, not really. I mean, it helps to know people, but at the same time, you know, you could call a week or two ahead anywhere and get a reservation for the most part. Sometimes, you know, the day of or a couple of days before is fine. You know, we're starting to see a lot of New York restaurants come down here. Lagaloo being one of them, which just opened up last month. Bill Bouquet is opening up. So New Yorkers are starting to come down here and say, oh, I know that restaurant, or I know that restaurant. So they're starting to feel more at home, even though they're, you know, 1,000 miles away.
Are all those concentrated in more that village area that you were talking about, kind of in the center?
Yeah, they're all in town.
Okay.
The St. Ambrose is now here as well. So there's a lot of New York creature comforts that are coming down here. And I think, you know, it's only just the beginning.
You're on mute, John. John, you're on mute.
I'm laughing at John Payton's question in the chat window. I was about to ask the same question. If you have a regular guy in his 40s, maybe he's 54 years old and he's got a couple of kids and he only has $1 million, where do you send him other than across the causeway?
Oh, no, I'm just kidding. In West Palm Beach. Although that market is becoming, so everything is basically moving west. So Palm Beach was the most expensive, and then we have an area in West Palm Beach that was called, or we referred to as East of Olive, which is, right along the Intercoastal Way. That was always where people would go if they couldn't afford Palm Beach. And now we also have an area that is west of Olive. People that used to be able to afford East of Olive are now going west of Olive, and so on and so forth. So everything is just migrating west. So no matter what your budget is within a certain price range, we can always find something.
You can always find something, even for trying to find my, let's see if I can move. Yeah, can you see it? All right, there we go. Trying to put my map back on. Can you see it?
Yeah.
You see the listing.
Yeah, I see the listing.
And now the map?
No.
No map.
All right, I see the map. All right, never mind. We'll stop that. I was going to pull up the map of the spaces you were talking about. So really, West Palm Beach is the opportunity for $1 million to $3 million people, and so that's where the people who are priced out of the Palm Beach market are going to.
Yes. And it's actually interesting because I personally live in West Palm Beach. I was raised in West Palm Beach. And for me, West Palm Beach is somewhat of a hidden gem that most people don't realize. Some people get really focused on their zip code. So 33480 is Palm Beach. Everyone wants to be in Palm Beach, but the reality is most people can't afford Palm Beach. But if it were me and I had the money to kind of spend, I would much rather live on the water and look at Palm Beach than to be in Palm Beach and look at West Palm Beach. Because, when you live on the water in West Palm Beach, say for $5, $6, $7 million, now there's actually our first listing close to 20 million, but you're looking at 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million homes. So from my perspective, I think West Palm Beach is great value for what you get. And what you look at too.
So whereas the values of Palm Beach are, they are what they are. It's a very inelastic market in that sense. Will depending upon economic changes, will West Palm Beach be substantially more elastic in price?
I think what's interesting about West Palm Beach is that there will be less elasticity in price because West Palm Beach, it tends to be a little bit more of a year-round population than Palm Beach. So regardless if you're looking in August versus January, the prices somewhat, stay the same. Whereas in a normal year, which obviously this year is not, summer tends to be a great time for buyers to come down and try to get great deals in Palm Beach. This year, we were in August and it felt like February. So that's out the window. But typically West Palm Beach, you have a more consistent pricing throughout the year, whereas Palm Beach, you see, an influx in pricing depending on the year, on a typical year.
So if someone can't buy in Palm Beach and they don't want to live in West Palm Beach, what are typically the other places they talk about that I'll live in Sunny Isle, I'll live in whatever, what are the places?
Sure. So just south of us is a town called Manalapan, and that is a very, very small town, but it's a very concentrated town. So if people are looking to get on the water and they want to be in the $20 to $30 million range, you're going to get a much better bang for your buck if you're in Manalapan than you are in Palm Beach. Having said that, I would also say going north, a lot of people go up to Jupiter. So Manalapan is about 15 minutes from Worth Avenue, right from downtown. So it's really not that far, but again, it's a different zip code and it's not living in Palm Beach. So people don't necessarily want to look there sometimes.
People going to Palm Beach fly into Fort Lauderdale?
No, we have a local Palm Beach International Airport, which is, 10 minutes from any given point, maybe 15 minutes from any given point in Palm Beach. And until recently there was flights. I don't know, JetBlue had 5 to 6, 7 flights a day in and out of New York. I think that's down to like 1 or 2 now. But that was the other thing is that the airlines have made it so easy for New Yorkers to get here. And then once you're here, you literally get off the plane and you're in your house in 15 to 20 minutes, whereas in New York, it could take you an hour or so.
Yeah, for sure.
But to the further point about where else to go is Jupiter Island area, which is north of us, which a lot of people tend to move up there too, because you get more space. There's not much of a town and not much of a community there, but you do have, great homes, great value, great neighbors. And it's just a little more remote, if you will.
And that's how far from you?
About a half an hour,
Okay.
half hour, 40 minutes.
What about Delray Beach?
Sure. Yeah, Delray is another one that's great. It's probably about 20 minutes to a half an hour from Palm Beach. Delray starting to see some incredible numbers down there as well, in particular on the water. When I was growing up, thinking about $1 million or $2 million home in Delray was unheard of. Now $20, $30 million is being achieved. So that's definitely a great secondary market. I would say Delray is probably the more relaxed, beach friendly, and informal of any of the neighborhoods I just described.
All right. I know that you said we're only in the 3rd inning. I heard that, and that we got a lot of runway to go. But I just got to say, how dependent are you on a rockin' stock market? I mean, the New York the stock market is doing fine and money is cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get why you could say that these prices can continue to rise. However, GDP, we are still in the middle of a COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You're still very much dependent on New York. New Yorkers are not getting the money they thought they were going to get when they're selling their apartments.
Sure.
So is it possible that there's a bit of a bubble? And, what is that bubble dependent on, or what is that market dependent on right now?
Sure. I mean, I wish I had the crystal ball, because we'd all be making, better sales and more money. But it's tough. Palm Beach has always been somewhat sheltered and not as affected by ups and downs in the stock market as other real estate markets. I think that has something to do with just the concentration of wealth that this market has. So if someone's worth $100 million and their portfolio goes down 20%, they're still worth a lot of money, and they still have plenty of money to put into a strong real estate investment. So, I mean, how much of a bubble this COVID thing is becoming is yet to be seen, but I think we're still kind of, in the beginning stages of it. At least I hope we are.
Is it fair to say that the secondary markets, West Palm Beach, Delray, those will be affected first, and that you'll begin to see a little bit of softness there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll probably see corrections in the market first in West Palm Beach and in the Delray markets before we will in Palm Beach, for sure.
All right, John asks, how many real estate agents service Palm Beach, and do you have an MLS there?
Yes, so we have a MLS that's specific to Palm Beach. And among that MLS system, there is about 1,200 realtors that are members of the Palm Beach MLS board.
1,200. Just for perspective, I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but there's about 800 who service Greenwich. And I think we've got, and that's a town of 60,000 people. And you've got about 400 in Darien and 400 in New Canaan. And those are towns of 20,000 people. So you are a town of 8,000 people with 1,200 realtors, just to put this in perspective.
Sure. One of the reasons why I almost didn't get into the business, because there's just, your competition is incredible. I mean, our market is saturated with agents. But what I'm sure a lot of people on this call will attest to is most people don't realize how much work it is to be a successful realtor. So some people may hang their license, but they're really not working. Their friend comes up to them and says, hey, I'm going to sell my house, or, maybe they even get their real estate license because they want to sell their house in the future. So I would say about 90% of our business, maybe not even 95% of our business, is done by a handful of agents here.
So if John Payton and I come down and Roberto come down and get our $1 million houses in West Palm Beach and join the Pulitzer McGurk team, can we break in, or do you really have to be a native and ties to the school community and all that? I mean, it's tough to break in, right?
It's definitely very tough to break in. And I think a lot of agents from New York come down and think, New York's Palm Beach in the winter. So, or vice versa. So, I'll be able to, hit the ground running. And I think it takes a lot of work for that to come to fruition.
But you're only at this 6 years and you're number one.
I work very hard.
You're doing something right.
But, all it takes is one sale, really, with these numbers. So it's definitely interesting. It's definitely an interesting market to be a part of and to kind of see the real estate community evolve over time, because the numbers and the activity is just, it's incredible.
All right, somebody else. Go ahead, Roberto. I think I cut you off.
No. I was just going to say, he said being done by a handful of people. And I was like, well, there's one of the handful right there.
Are you going to ask?
Our very own Whitney.
I got a long way to go, though. I mean, to put some things into perspective, I think I would say the number 2 realtor in Palm Beach, I think last year he did about 650 million himself. I mean, granted, he has his assistants and what have you, but that's a lot of real estate. And then the number 1 realtor in town just sold his house for about $35 million last year. So I think he's done a lot of transactions.
How is your team set up for the 2 of you? Do you guys have an admin? Do you have showers? Do you have anything? Just the 2 of you?
The 2 of us, yeah. So we, hit the ground running every morning pretty much.
And you do every job, every task?
Yeah, every task. I mean, unfortunately, I deal with very small rentals and I deal with great sales. But, when I leave here, I'll be doing a $2,000 a month rental. So, and writing up the lease myself. So I try to keep it all together with the 2 of us so that we can, know every inch of our business. So as we grow, that may change, but for now, it's just the 2 of us.
That's great. What were you doing before the last 6 years?
I was actually, I was living in New York City and I worked for Ralph Lauren.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What part of town did you live in?
I kind of ran the gamut. I lived on the Upper East Side. I lived in Chelsea. I lived down in Soho, and I lived in Union Square too. So a little bit of everywhere.
What did you do for Ralph?
I ran their watch and jewelry division. So they had.
I did all their sports marketing for 5 years.
Oh, okay, great.
I thought you looked familiar.
Yeah, my offices were in both mansions up on 72nd Street, and
I was at 650.
Okay, great. Were you under Beth?
Joy Herfel. She ran the wholesale division. And David, I reported into David.
So one question is typical listings 5%. Now, John says that because he's out here in Connecticut. I'd like to hear from Roberto whether the same is true in New York. Are people discounting in either of your markets especially at the luxury end, at the high end?
people, sellers always don't want to pay a commission, but I don't think it really serves them. And I don't think that most people are looking to see what they're going to get paid on a certain deal. But if you have a client that's looking at a, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million apartment, and you see that the commission is much less on one than another, a lot of people are going to sway one way or the other, especially when you're dealing with prices at like 17 or 18 million, trying to sell a townhouse. And you look at, one property is at 2.5%, the other one's just at 2%. It's a big difference. And
Well,
I think
let's put a number on it. Are you seeing 25% of high-end listings, let's say in the over $10 million category? Would you say that there are 25, an appreciable amount are discounting the commissions to win the business?
nah.
No, I'm not seeing it in Connecticut
I don't think
either.
it's that common. And literally, honestly, when you look at some properties that just don't sell, sometimes I think it's like you get what you pay for. And sometimes the representation they have is actually very poor. You have to, if you bring something to market, you present it well, you give it everything, you should get some of that back. But you also have to be realistically price things. The aspirational pricing is they just hurt themselves.
How about you, Whitney? Are they discounting in Palm Beach?
Yeah, well, to your point about pricing, the biggest indicator when something's overpriced is that it doesn't sell, especially right now. So if it's priced right, it'll sell. Our commissions, it's interesting because our inventory even pre-COVID was minimal in the hundreds. We really couldn't. There's no inventory to steer away from based on commissions. Whereas in New York City, your inventory, is probably 10 times as much as ours. So you can buy, apartment 4B or 5B. It doesn't matter. It's the same price, same location, and 5B is a better commission. Yeah, you're going to steer them to 5B. But here, I would say we're starting to see total commissions to about 5%. Anything above the 6 to 8 million range. Anything below that, we're at a total of 6. Some people list in the 30 million range at a 6% commission. So it really just depends. But to Roberto's point, you get what you pay for. Navigating these complex deals sometimes and taking the weight of it off your shoulders is worth the 2.5, 3, whatever percent that the seller's paying. Time is money, and the less they have to deal with the actual sale of their property, I think it has value to them.
So we're running up against the end of the hour. I don't know. Do we have any great conclusions? Did we have any great wisdom out of the hour? I learned a lot about Palm Beach, that's for sure. I guess I discovered that as precious as Palm Beach is, and the properties are skyrocketing and the prices are going up and continue and expected to continue to go up, you also have these buffer zones, West Palm Beach and Jupiter and some of those other, so that you have a place for regular guys like John Bainton and I, to go buy $1 million, and yourself, you live in West Palm Beach.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's something for everyone, no matter what your price point is to a certain degree, but we're just starting to see everyone come down here for a multitude of reasons, whether it be an assistant that's working at a hedge fund or what have you. So there's always something for somebody. The only thing is don't wait, because you might price yourself out of whatever market you're in today, could be gone in 2 months.
You remember the people that I referred to you? I ended up speaking to her, and she, in her email back to me, she was like, we felt it with the prices were so high. So they bought in Sunny Isle. And I was just like, well, you should have bought something.
Yeah. I don't think they could afford what they were looking at now, but and that was just I guess about a year and a half ago, but yeah, our market's moving so rapidly. I was going to say, not that the crazy thing about our market too is, we don't really have contracts that are contingent on mortgages. Everyone pays cash for the most part. but every once in a while we'll get an appraiser to call and ask to appraise a property. And our market's moving so quickly that nothing makes any sense. So appraisers are probably have the toughest job of anyone in the real estate market right now.
I can imagine that.
Well, I think that's a great hour. It's 5:02. Thank you very much for, I mean, we kept you talking for 60 minutes straight.
Yeah.
And man, that was a lot of good content. I learned a lot about the Florida market, the relationship between Florida, Palm Beach, and New York. Why do they go? Why do they stay? How do they downsize? And from Rorik, I learned about their tastes, and I realized that Roberto and I would have to leave our neckties behind because they're not welcome down there.
Sorry,
We have to casual it up.
Frank.
And I guess
Frank
on
Dean
that,
Martin now.
and I guess on that note, I'll say goodbye to everybody.
Whitney, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
all.
Scott, Lisa, good to see you guys.
Good to see
Bye,
you.
Roberto. See you, John.
We're going to take
Thank
next
you,
week
Whitney.
off, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Great.
Thursday, 4 o'clock.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
Bye.
I,